So guys, welcome in. If you're just tuning in, we are part of the 6th annual Summa Laude College Fantasy Football League, College Fantasy Football Mock Draft. We're going to go ahead and live stream a lot of my picks tonight. This is something we haven't done before. This is really just to kick off the season for us, to try some new things out. And if this goes off well, we'll probably do this a couple of times throughout the summer, maybe even more often than that. But I would imagine there's going to be quite a few of you all that watch this on replay as opposed to tuning in live right now. There are a few of you all on. I'm going to take as many questions as I can. I've got the draft going. I've got the live stream going. I'm going to try to get to some of your questions, all while doing this on a 45-second timer. So it's going to be a challenge to do this tonight, but I've got my cheat sheet here in front of me. I've got the entire College Fantasy Football site 2019 preseason draft guide laid out here before me. I know where everything's at, and so I'm going to be following the draft, offering some commentary on some picks here, and trying to take your questions at the same time tonight. So welcome in. We will not post this live on the site until next week, when John releases his article on the draft, and it's going to offer a lot of insights with a lot of guys that are really in the industry, college fantasy football. If you're not following any of those guys on Twitter, take a look at our Twitter feed. There's all their handles right there. But really, thanks to John for going ahead and setting this up and really getting us started here as the summer is about to kick off. And really, this is sort of the jumping point. We do one or two mocks leading up to this, but this is sort of a collection of the minds, and the first one that we've been involved with a lot of guys around the industry, a lot of guys that I respect. And if you're not following them, you should. I know John and Justin and Scott do great work over with Fantrax, and that's the host of tonight's draft, Fantrax, where I believe that is the #1 spot for college fantasy football. If you don't have your league on Fantrax, you should be there. But Justin, John, Scott, they do a good job with the podcast, and really they've gotten things started over there. If you're not following and supporting those guys, you really should be. So guys, there might be some moments here or there where I'm going in and out. Bear with me. What I've got here set up on the screen, I'm just going to walk you through it. We're in the Fantrax live draft room. All I did was go ahead and line up the column on the left side of the screen so you guys can get an idea of the last 10 picks or so that are being made. I might joggle back and forth between some windows here, but for the most part, this is going to be the screen that you're going to see for most of the draft. I'll give some commentary on my picks, maybe some picks throughout the evening, and just offer some answers to questions that may come in across the chat room. So bear with us, guys. We're going to get started here in about 3 minutes. I think we're going to start at the top of the hour, and we'll go ahead and get started with the draft. I have to tell you, going into the draft, for me personally, and if I doubt these guys are watching on the live stream right now, but for me, my personal preference on the draft this year is I'm looking if I have a top 3 pick to go with Taylor, Etienne, and Benjamin. If not, I'm probably going to be targeting Rondale Moore. I always like receivers in the drafts early. Let me make sure I've got some things put on mute. Volume off there. And I think we're going to be set to go, guys. So yeah, like I said, if I looks like I assume the draft order is set. Let me see. If the draft order is set and I end up with pick number 8, I'm expecting Taylor, Etienne, Benjamin, De'Ara King. If Jalen Hurts is there, I will likely take him. I'm really high on Zach Moss this season. If he's there, I may go ahead and take him. I feel like I could still get a pretty decent quarterback in the second round. So we'll see how this plays out. Traditionally, I do this a lot, unless there's some home run picks, guys. I really love taking the stud wide receiver early in the draft, and that's why I have Rondale Moore targeted so high for me. The system stays the same. Yeah, the quarterback's going to change, but in that system, it's all about getting him the ball in space. I think they're going to do that. I think you're going to see another 100+ catch season from him this year, and I just think that the stud receivers are hot commodities on draft day. They don't come a dime a dozen like some of the running backs and quarterbacks do. Now, with that being said, most of the time your season's going to be made of it's make or break based on your quarterback. But I just feel that there's so many good quarterbacks this year that I may not get an elite one, but I'd rather have the elite receiver over the elite quarterback. That's my personal preference. Different strategies out there all over the place, and you should have one going into your draft. If you haven't jumped on our preseason fantasy guide and you're watching this video, guys, go ahead. What are you waiting for? I mean, we've got we've got the player rankings, we've got cheat sheets, we've got freshmen to watch, true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, returning offensive line starters, sleepers, potential busts, draft day cheat sheets, mock drafts. We've got it all, guys. If you're new to the CFF site and you have not taken a look at our preseason fantasy draft guide, we have the 2018 version up on the homepage. Check it out. That's what you'll get in 2019 and more. As a matter of fact, I printed ours out right before the draft. It's 47 pages, PDF, digital download. Go ahead and check it out. And the draft has started, guys, with the Eric King going as the top pick of the draft, which I do think is a good pick. Even though Holgerson is in, I still like King. I still like the system. I still like the weapons around him. And I said if Hurts was available, I would take him. And Hurts and Rondale Moore just went 2 and 3. Which means that I'm still going to probably lose out on Taylor, Etienne, and Benjamin in the next 3 spots. I'm thinking Zach Moss if he's there. I really like Zach Moss. Offensive coordinator said that he's looking to give him at least 25 touches a game. And so I think you're going to see big things from Zach Moss this year if he's actually if he's healthy, which we're expecting him to be. So Jonathan Taylor, Etienne off the board, and I'm expecting Benjamin to go with one of these next 2 picks before I'm on the clock, which will put me down for either Zach Moss or Nathan Rourke. Sam Ehlinger. And there's Eno Benjamin by my friend Mike Bainbridge. Mike's going to be drafted right before me before him, so this will be interesting how this plays out for most of the night. And true to my word, I will go ahead and take Zach Moss in the first round. I'm expecting big things from Zach Moss this year. Really, I would have no argument. Zach Moss, Patrick Taylor, Joshua Kelly, Juwan Washington. I would have no argument with any of those guys right there. It is all just personal preference. And then Laviska Shenault just went off the board, wide receiver for Colorado, who I have 5. I've gotten a lot of questions on him this year as well about him possibly being higher, but I'm really curious to see how he plays within that new system in Colorado. I still think if they're going to win games, they have to get him his touches. But it'll be interesting. You know, he had the injury last year. Are they going to give him the touches in the Wildcat formation like they did last year? It'll be interesting to see how they utilize him in the new system. Now, the one thing that I'm not sure going into this draft, it seems to be a 2-quarterback league. With a 2-quarterback lead, I feel that I can wait a little longer on quarterbacks because the 1-quarterback league really favors the guy that gets the elite players because everyone can only start 1. I feel sometimes that I can get 2 good players to make up for somebody else that has an elite and maybe an average quarterback too. So we'll see how that plays out. And I can see that the way that this is going, it's going to be really hard to keep up, guys. But if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them in. Be glad to try to get those in for you. Try to get some answers for you. So we're 3 picks away here. And Juwan Washington, Michael Warren, A.J. Dillon still on the board. I'm looking at a group of receivers. You've got Tagovailoa, Fields, and Gabrud. Sanders from Oklahoma State, who I do think could be a home run pick this year. I'll be interested to see how some of these guys, where he goes off the board. And I have to tell you, when I'm doing some of these drafts, there are some players that I do like that I actually pass on purpose just to see how far they'll actually fall. Spencer Sanders may be one of those players tonight. I'm real curious to see where some of these other guys have him playing out. I actually like him. I don't know if I like him as a quarterback 1, but if you get a quarterback 1 coming back in 2, not bad pickup right there. So that puts me on the clock here, and if Juwan Washington is still available, which is tough to follow the draft, he is. I'll go ahead and start with my backfield now. Juwan Washington, a little change up in the offense at San Diego State. They played against Ohio in the bowl game. Interesting enough, they're going to run a very similar offense, which is still a very run-heavy offense. So even though the system may change a little bit, and the scheme a little bit, I'm still expecting San Diego State to get to Juwan Washington to get a healthy dose of carries in that San Diego State offense in 2019. And then Fields, Tagovailoa. Getting hard to keep up with these now. Now, one guy that I'm really high on this year, any decent quarterback play, is Jalen Reagor at TCU. I mean, what he did last year with abysmal quarterback play was really unbelievable. And I think if TCU can get any decent quarterback play this year, it is all about getting the ball in his hands. You know, well, I'll give a shout out now while I have a little bit before I'm back on the clock. I mentioned earlier that Mike Bainbridge and I will be drafting right around one another, have consecutive picks in every round. If you're not following Mike, if you're not following him and really supporting him on his Patreon page, you're really doing it wrong, guys. I'm telling you right now, I've gotten to know Mike over the last several years since he's been doing a lot of college fantasy football stuff. Mike is really good. I'm telling you right now, if you're not supporting Mike Bainbridge and his Patreon and you're a supporter on Patreon, you're not a supporter for him on Patreon. You should be. Mike does some good work all year round for college fantasy football. Great guy, solid work, and I'm telling you right now, I recommend following Mike if you need another opinion other than the CFF site. Mike Bainbridge is your guy, and a lot of these other guys, man. If you love Twitter, these other guys, they're always active on Twitter with college fantasy football year round. A lot of them in dynasty leagues. They follow these guys on Twitter. You really need to. They're part of the college fantasy football Twitter community, and they're tweeting out stuff, opinions all year round, guys. So follow all of the guys that are on that link there that we had posted out on Twitter a little earlier before the draft. So now we're getting to the part where I am not really following the draft too well, and I have a feeling my commentary is going to distract me quite a bit. So we're going to see how this plays out. I'm going to go ahead and cue some guys up. So these picks are flying in hot and heavy, guys. So to keep up, it's you got to bear with me a little bit here. I'm going to get some guys in queue. Now, because I'm not really following the draft pick for pick here, guys, I'm just queuing up a bunch of guys that I like this year, not necessarily in order. It's going to be hard for me to even start scratching guys off of the cheat sheet. So what I'll do is I'll start queuing some guys up that I like. If he's available, I'll go ahead and take him. Not necessarily the best guy on the board, but for the sake of this process of just kind of getting the picks out there, letting you guys see the scroll that's going in with the picks coming in, and maybe answering some questions later on. That's how we're going to roll things with things tonight during the draft. So I'll probably pick a lot of guys that I like, a lot of guys with high upside, probably overshoot on some of these guys, maybe take them a little bit earlier than maybe I would if I was following this draft 100%. But I'm just going to queue a whole bunch of guys up, and we'll see how it plays out. And I'm back on the clock. So Jalen Reagor's still right there. Antonio Gandy Golden with Hugh Freeze. I really like that pick too. I'm going to go ahead and flip a coin between those two guys right now. I am just going to take the coin flip gamble on Gandy Golden just because I know what we're getting from a coach. We know what we're getting from quarterback play for him. Even though I love Reagor's upside, but we're going to go ahead and go with Gandy Golden right here with our third pick. I'll probably jump on a few receivers early if some of these guys that I like at the top stay up there. Warren Jackson's another one for Colorado State. If the numbers hold true to some of the numbers that Colorado State receivers put up over the years, then Warren Jackson could be your guy this year for Colorado State. So Reagor did get picked, not much farther than I did. I had Chuba Hubbard in the queue. He got picked as well. I still have Spencer Sanders in the queue. It'll be interesting to see if he lasts until my pick. But I'm going to go ahead and get a few guys queued up. I'll let you know who I'm queuing up as we go. So Cole McDonald, Hawaii, is still around. Yeah, he's in a quarterback battle. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out, but I'm going to go ahead and queue him up. Tommy DeVito at Syracuse. I expect them to throw the ball a lot more than, he doesn't have the ability that Dungy had. So I expect DeVito to throw the ball around the yard a little bit more. And Cole McDonald just went off the board as soon as I put him in queue. One more pick until me, and DeVito is still on the board right now. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm going to queue up some running backs real quick, see if I have time to throw some guys in queue here. Kylan Hill is still available at running back. I do like this year in that offense. And J.K. Dobbins is still available. So I'm a little running back heavy right now. I'm not big on jumping on DeVito right now. Do I want to take a chance on Warren Jackson right now? No, I don't. So for me, I'm going to come down to Kylan Hill and J.K. Dobbins with this pick, and I'm gonna say that Hill is healthier this year. I know he was a little banged up last year, but with 5 seconds on the clock, I'm going to go ahead and jump on Kylan Hill this year as my running back 3 behind Zach Moss and Juwan Washington. So he'll probably slide into that flex spot for me. So now I'm going to start turning my attention a little bit more to wide receivers. I'm going to turn my attention to quarterbacks. And I have to tell you right now, at this point of the draft, I do like Hunter Bryant, the tight end at Florida Atlantic. I have a feeling he's going to put wide receiver numbers up. So I'm going to go ahead and probably queue him up and maybe just get him as early as round 5 and just take what I believe may be the best statistical wide receiver in this year's college fantasy football draft. So now I've got Warren Jackson in queue. I've got Tommy DeVito. I've got J.K. Dobbins. I've got Hunter Bryant. And I'm going to go ahead and load some more quarterbacks up, get them in queue, and let's see where I go from here. Because now we're going to start thinning out at the quarterback position. And here's why, and I'm going to use my picks tonight as an example of sometimes, there's a lot of guys, and the belief is that you should load up on running backs early and often in college fantasy football. And I have to, tell you, in full FBS leagues, I'm not sure if I really buy that philosophy, because I'm sitting here with Zach Moss, Juwan Washington, and Kylan Hill, and I still have J.K. Dobbins, Isaiah Bowser, and Andrew Van Buren for Boise State in queue. Now, is Van Buren going to be the starter? We don't know for sure. I'm going to say that from a talent perspective that he probably has the edge. So we'll see how things play out in preseason camp. But I believe Boise State right now leads the nation in consecutive 1,000-yard rushing seasons at the running back position. So if Van Buren is the guy and he happens to be the starter and keeps the job, you're possibly looking at least another 1,000-yard season from a Boise State running back. So that's what my hope is for Van Buren. My guess is he may stick around for another round or two. I'll probably look at quarterback, tight end, like I mentioned, Hunter Bryant, and I'll probably start queuing in some wide receivers here in a second. Adrian Hardy, Louisiana Tech, still available. I do like Adrian Hardy this year a lot. You've got Damani Coxey from Memphis. He may be taken. Looks like, yep, he just got taken 3 picks ago. It's another player I like. It'll be interesting to see what Ty Lee can do with a new quarterback at Middle Tennessee, but I do think he's going to rack up some catches for us this year. Let's see if Rico Bussey is still available for North Texas. Looks like he's gone. So I'm going to stay with the guys I have in queue. I'm up. Mike just took Kellen Mond. And I am going to go ahead and just jump on Hunter Bryant right now in round 5 and just get my tight end position out of the way. So John Laude looked like he jumped on the Texas connection, picked Ellinger, and then came back with Colin Johnson 4 rounds later. So he's going with the hookup. Now let's see who else we have at receiver here. We've got Tyler Johnson for Minnesota. Let's see if he is still available. Looks like he's gone. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to play this out. I want to say, guys, it could be, I'm not sure how many rounds we have here. I think it could be 16. I'm not sure. As we get towards the end of the draft, I'm going to probably start taking a lot of young guys, true freshmen that I think could have impact for the sake of this mock draft. I don't like to kind of stick close to the vest. I'm going to go ahead and take some long shots or some chances as we get later in the draft just for the sake of conversation. Now, it looks like Warren Jackson just went off the board, so I lost him out of my queue, and I really like that pick here in round 5. Now, the one thing that I like to do, and here's something to consider too for your drafts. One of my draft philosophies is that I usually, first of all, in any league that plays with a kicker, I'm not a fan of. I don't like kicker. This is college fantasy football. We do not have to tailor this to be like NFL fantasy football. I do not like utilizing the kicker. If you do, I understand it's another position. I actually like extended rosters. I like the 2 quarterbacks. I like 3 running backs, 4 receivers, 2 flex. I don't even like the tight end requirement in college fantasy football. I think wide receiver, tight end should be a hybrid position, and that flex should be either a running back, wide receiver, or tight end. And then I like to go with the double defenses. I like 2 defenses, just like I like 2 quarterbacks, because I think it offers a level playing field for the teams that grab the Alabamas when they're playing the Charleston Southerns and some of those big FBS versus FCS mismatches. So I do like 2 defensive starting teams as well. So I like to hold off in drafts if I can't get elite defense, and I'm on the clock. So I'm going to finish that thought here, and I'm going to go ahead and take Tommy DeVito for Syracuse and jump on him here since I don't have a quarterback. But I'm going to go ahead and finish that thought. I don't like to draft if I can't get an elite defense. I like to pass on kicker and defense altogether. I'll leave them undrafted. If it's not a requirement to draft a kicker or defense, I will draft position players and pass on my defense and defense and kickers, and I'll go ahead and stream my defenses, play it out, see if I get lucky in the free agent on the waiver wire with one during the season. But I like taking extra position players that are in position battles that have potential to do something in their offense, and then drop some of those players that I feel aren't going to win the job or aren't going to be as good as I thought they were before the season starts, and then go ahead and add my defense, then go ahead and add my kickers. So that happens every year, guys. I try not to draft kickers or defenses unless I can get an absolute stud of a defense, and sometimes that's usually not the case because a lot of guys jump on defenses, and I wouldn't be surprised here to see some of the good defenses go as early as the 8th or 9th round of this draft. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how that plays out as well. Now we still have Isaiah Bowser on the board right now. We're still about 10 picks from me, but I have to tell you from a value standpoint, I love high volume guys. You hear it every year on the site. I post it every year in my emails. I'll be doing it again. If I can get a guy that's going to get 25 carries a game, potentially 25 plus carries a game, that's the guy. I'm going to take him, particularly now as a 4th running back on my roster. To get Isaiah Bowser at this time, I think would be an absolute steal. So we'll see how that plays out. I still have my eyes on Adrian Hardy, wide receiver, Louisiana Tech, and I have Andrew Van Buren, Boise State running back, as my backup plan. Now, it would be interesting to see if Malcolm Perry is still on the board, quarterback for Navy. And he is. So he is going back to quarterback this year. They are going to change some things and build the offense around him this year. It'll be interesting in how they utilize Malcolm Perry, but I'm expecting a better outcome than last year. And remember, they switched him from quarterback to running back and still topped 1,000 yards. So I think at this particular point, it's worth a shot. Now, Mark just took Adrian Hardy. Great pick, Mark. Love that pick right there. Get Hardy at someone that could catch 80 plus, 90 passes at this point in round 7 is a real steal. And guys, we're already in the 7th round pick. I know some guys have some commitments to do podcasts. John, Scott, I think Justin are all doing their podcasts tonight. So we've got a 45-second timer. This draft is going to go by super fast. So thanks to you guys for coming in. Thanks for you guys for watching this. It's going to be on replay next week after John gets his article. All the guys in the draft are going to offer their insight on some of the picks, surprise picks, whose teams they like best, and expect that to come from John in the next week or so. So we'll be on the lookout for that, and I'll see if I can't push that out on Twitter myself. Now, Najee Harris is gone. I was looking for him. I think Najee Harris can have a big year for Alabama this year. I'm on the clock, so I'm going to be stuck with taking a pick. I'm still looking up players. Bowser did go, so I'm going to go ahead and go with a wide receiver again right here and just jump on Ty Lee this early, even though I still have 20 seconds. But we'll go ahead and get Ty Lee in the roster right here. Two wide receivers I'm queuing up right now are both Syracuse receivers. We've got Taj Harris, we've got Tristan Jackson. Tristan Jackson, the Michigan State transfer. Taj Harris had a good freshman campaign last year. Now, keep in mind, these aren't, these are going to be the outside receivers. And I think with DeVito now as the quarterback, you're going to see Syracuse stretch the field a little bit more in 2019. So I think this could be the year that, and so here's the dilemma. Do we take Taj Harris? Do we take Tristan Jackson? I was all in on Tristan Jackson, waiting for him to become eligible after sitting out the 2018 season. But seeing what Taj Harris did, there's just a gut feeling that I think he could be their top outside wideout this year. So that may be a guy that I take a chance on right here. I scooped up DeVito a little earlier in the draft. I'm only sitting on 2 receivers, still have 3 running backs, already have my tight end. I may go ahead and take my first shot with Taj Harris, the wide receiver at Syracuse right here in round number 8 we're in, and we're only 2 picks from me. Feel good that he's actually going to be picked. Now, Josh just picked Asim Rose from Kentucky, who I do like as a sleeper running back this year. So I do like that pick. I'm not following too many of the picks, but I am trying to follow a few here or there, trying to give you the commentary on why I am queuing up a few guys in the draft tonight. So I'm on deck, and it looks like I'm going to go ahead and get Tristan Jackson. Go ahead and get Taj Harris. I think I'm going to go ahead and take him right here. I'm on the clock, and we're going to go ahead and take the Syracuse receiver. Now, I may come back and take Tristan Jackson a couple of rounds later if he's still available, but I'm assuming that there's one of these guys are thinking like I am. One of these 2 guys are going to be the breakout receiver on the outside receiver for Syracuse. So unless Tristan Jackson really falls 3 or 4 rounds, for me, I don't see where I'm going to be taking him here in the next round or 2. Looks like Shane Buechele's gone. I'm kind of queuing up some quarterbacks here. Caleb Evans, gone. So we're pretty low on the list. Ian Book, still available. I'll queue him up. Brock Purdy's still available. I'll go ahead and queue him up. And I don't really see, I'm not going to go too far down on the list, but after that, I'm going to start looking at some of the freshman long shot players that I think could do a little bit damage. So when I get my second quarterback, and Malcolm Perry is still available right now, so I don't want to overlook him either. So we are coming up. This is the last pick of the 8th round. We're already in the 9th round of the 6th annual Summa Cum Laude College Fantasy Football Mock Draft, spearheaded by John Laude. If you're not following John on Twitter, you should. John, Scott, and Justin all do a good job on the Fantrax podcast. I believe it's the On Campus podcast that Fantrax puts it on. And they do a good job, and so they're creating their content throughout the summer, leading up to the season. I'm hope to be on with them in an episode or 2 coming up, maybe in another month or so as we get closer to the season. But if you're not following those guys and all of the other guys that are part of this draft on Twitter, you should be. They're a very active college fantasy football community, and a few guys asked me, why don't we get involved in a little bit more dialogue on the college, with the college fantasy football Twitter handle? And quite frankly, we don't have time, guys. We are burning out content all the time. Not saying that none of these guys are, but we are doing that. We really don't get involved too much of opinions, dialogue on Twitter. The purpose of Twitter for us is to get the player news out there, to get our content out there when it's ready. We've done a lot to revamp the site this year. If you've become a member already of the of the CFF site in 2019, thanks for your patience on that. We created a new membership platform, integrated that this year. So we're doing more and more every year with the college fantasy football site, and just glad that you guys could be along for the ride. And we value your opinion more than anything. So keep the feedback coming, and I answer all the emails. emails, guys, so keep them coming in this year. We're on deck right now, and Mike Bainbridge is on the clock. And, you know, I actually think I'm going to jump on Andrew Van Buren right here. I'm sitting 3 quarterbacks. You can never have enough. I like the ceiling in that Boise State offense. If they can kind of get some things going for Boise, for me, and we're 30 seconds left on the timer, are they going to rebuild or are they going to reload? And I think a program like Boise State in the Mountain West goes ahead and reloads. And so I am going to take Andrew Van Buren right here with this pick while we're on the clock. So I'm seeing a lot of names scroll by. There are a lot of players that I actually like that are going. I'm not really kind of checking to see where we're at in this, but I'm going to go ahead and queue up a couple of more receivers while we're here, and let's see where we're going. We've got Keith Corbin still in queue. I just queued him up, still on the board. I like that with Dana Holgorsen coming in. Dana Holgorsen's offense has produced a number of 1,000-yard receivers over the last few years. I think we're going to see more than Marquez Stevenson involved in this offense, and I think Keith Corbin has potential to be a stud wide receiver in that offense for quarterback De'Aaron King. So it'd be interesting to see if Corbin's still around when I come back. I'm sitting on Gandy Golden, Ty Lee, Taj Harris. I don't necessarily feel like I have a lot of firepower at wide receiver, but somebody like Keith Corbin coming in right now may actually start above Ty Lee and Taj Harris on a weekly basis by the time this season gets rolling. So let's see if he's still available when it comes back to me. Tamorrion Terry is gone, so he won't be there from Florida State, which of course let's see if DJ Matthews would be available. So DJ Matthews, who I do think with Tamorrion Terry could be a double threat in that Florida State offense. I think those two guys could be the wide receivers to watch. So I'm going to play the system on a couple of wide receiver picks that I have coming up. Still got Tristan Jackson on the board. I'm still only sitting 1 quarterback. Remember this. I'm going 1 quarterback for a while. We're going to see who I can get at the quarterback position late. That's going to be the name of the game right here. I've got Tommy DeVito, who's going to be the Syracuse starter. But is he enough? No, he's not. We've got to start 2 quarterbacks, but I'm going to play this out. I'm going to jump on the wide receivers and running backs early. I'm going to wait as long as kicker and defense as I possibly can. And we're going to see who I can get at quarterback later on in this draft. Right now, the only player that I have in queue that is still available, well, there's 3. I still have Malcolm Perry on the board. I still have Ian Book on the board and Brock Purdy. All 3 of those guys still on the board. With Malcolm Perry, you're looking at a 1,000-yard, maybe 1,200-yard rusher at the quarterback position. You're not going to get anything thrown for him, but it is going to be a one-way threat, and it's going to be like starting a running back at the quarterback position. We've got Ian Book and Brock Purdy, both, you know, they're mobile quarterbacks. They're not running quarterbacks. Are they dual-threat quarterbacks? No, but they can give you some on the ground, and I would not be surprised if both of those guys give us 30-plus total TDs this year in the 2019 season. But both of them are still on the board right now. So I think I'm going to go with Keith Corbin at my 4th wide receiver position right now, since that's the position I'm feeling a little light on. So I am on the clock. Scott did take Devontavian Martin, Gabriel Davis. Both of those guys just went before me. I'm really licking my chops right now with Keith Corbin and really just kind of letting it settle in while I'm on the clock, making sure there's no last-minute change that I have. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the button on Keith Corbin for Houston, and he's going to be my 4th wide receiver taken in tonight's draft. Now, I did mention I do have DJ Matthews in queue. We still have Lynn Bowden from Kentucky. He's still available. It'd be interesting to see if he gets more involved with the offense now that with running the ball, maybe, now that Benny Snell is no longer around. And, you know, I can't believe I didn't look this guy up. I let it completely pass. But Randall St. Felix is still available from South Florida, and I really like that South Florida offense this year. I looked up Jordan Cronkite earlier. It looked like somebody jumped on him earlier in the draft. I'm going to check for him one more time. I don't expect him to be around, but let's check on him. But I'd like to have Randall St. Felix. I do like Randall St. Felix, the vertical threat in that offense. I do think that he's in for a good year for the Bulls here in 2019. It'll be interesting. I need to see if... Okay, we're going to go ahead and check on a few players. I'm not expecting Kirk Merritt to be on the board for Arkansas State, but let's check him. He's still available. So we're getting to the point now where I'm finding a few receivers on the board. He just went. So Justin took him. Justin's ears must have been burning. As I mentioned, Kirk Merritt, he just went off the board. Now we're 3 picks away, and I've still got Malcolm Perry up there. We still have Ian Book. We still have Brock Purdy. DJ Matthews, who I like as a sleeper receiver in that Florida State offense if their offensive line does improve. We got Lynn Bowden, and we still have Randall St. Felix from South Florida available. Now we're sitting 4 wide receivers right now. I'm sitting 4 running backs. I'm only sitting 1 quarterback. So it'll be interesting right now. I may go ahead and pull the trigger on Brock Purdy. Mike Bainbridge is on the clock, and go ahead and take the Big 12 quarterback. When all things considered equal, if I'm going Book, if I'm going Purdy, I'm going Perry. I like a quarterback in the Big 12 at this point that has 30 touchdown potential. I'm going to go ahead and take him with this pick of that. I've got 20 seconds. I am on the clock. Brock Purdy is still available, so we're going to go ahead and take him as our quarterback 2 to go with Tommy DeVito. Now I'm going to start going into some of the freshmen guys. I'm going to start looking at my freshman list. We're only in round 12, but there's some guys that I could take a chance on, and we'll see how it plays out. I see somebody like John Emery for LSU went really early in this draft, so he's already off the board. Spencer Sanders is off the board as well. Andrew Van Buren, who I have, he's off the board. Let's see. So we're 2 picks away. Malcolm Perry is still sitting on the board right now. Ian Book still sitting on the board. And we're 2 picks away. I'm sitting on DeVito and Brock Purdy. I said I would wait on a quarterback, so I'll go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and wait on a quarterback and go ahead and jump on some of these other positional players that I like. I'm going to go ahead and pass on running back right now. It looks like it's teeing up. I'm on the clock. Trey Regis, good pick by Scott right there. Didn't realize he was still available, running back. So do I go Lynn Bowden? Do I go Randall St. Felix? I'm all in on the South Florida offense This year I love the passing game. This year I love the vertical threat of Randall St. Felix, and I love the conference. And considering I'm sitting on Ty Lee, Taj Harris, who's a question mark, Keith, I think right now Randall St. Felix can really round out a solid wide receiver core for me. And here's the thing. Wide receivers, there's very few guys that come back every year that are studs, right? So wide receiver are one of those positions that you can take a chance on in this draft. I mean, there are very few Rondell Moore, Tylan Wallace's, and Jalen Reagor's coming back. There are, once when you get past, wide receiver at about 12, you can start putting a few guys in the same mix. So we'll see how that plays out during the course of the season. But these are some of the guys that I think have real upside. When it comes to these drafts, and I say this all the time, and I'm going to share this philosophy with you guys, but once when you get past the 8th round of a college fantasy football draft, I'm no longer looking to take the average player. I'm going for guys with the high ceiling, the high upside. I do not want a guy that's going to give me 800 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns in the 10th round of the draft. I'm going for the guy that's got potential to get me 1,200 yards, 12 to 15 touchdowns, maybe give me 20 catches. I love the high ceiling guys at this point of the draft because most of your average players at this point of the draft, if they're just average players by week 5, week 6, and week 7, they're going to be off your roster because those are the guys that are going to be expendable that you're going to drop at the expense of picking up a waiver wire addition. So keep that in mind as you're drafting, guys. It's not necessarily about having the most solid roster top to bottom. It's about having a lot of high ceiling guys once when you get to the middle to late rounds. And if the guys don't pan out, those are going to be the ones that you're going to be swapping out for waiver wire additions halfway through the season anyway. Get your core guys. Get your 3 to 4 to 5 elite players on your roster and then build around them with some high ceiling guys once when you get into rounds 8. You can go ahead and go with your elite players in rounds 1, 2, and 3, and then rounds 4 through 8, get your solid guys up there. That's why I went with a Ty Lee, right? Because I'm expecting 75 plus catches from Ty Lee, 1,000 yards. History suggests, even though we're getting a new quarterback at Middle Tennessee, that's the type of season that we're probably going to get from him. The big question for Ty Lee is he going to find the end zone? That's always the question for him every year. That's why I liked Adrian Hardy earlier in the draft. I think the Louisiana Tech offense, historically, the leading receiver, you're going to get 75, 80 plus receptions from their number one target. So I'm back on deck, guys. So let me go ahead and get back to this draft. And there's still a number of players on there. And I've got some high ceiling guys queued up. I'm not necessarily sure if that's the way that I'm going to go right now. But Malcolm Perry did go off the clock. James Blackman just went with Mike Bainbridge, so he's buying into a Florida State offense at this point for value. And at this point of the draft, guys, I don't know. I think I'm just going to... I have some high ceiling guys, but I'm not sure if I'm going to take them right here. For the sake of not doing any research and not looking at any of the picks, guys, I'm just going to jump on Lynn Bowden right here for Kentucky wide receiver, just for a value pick at this point of the draft. I'm going to go ahead and start teeing up some guys, my next round of players that I'm really going to target while we have a few picks ahead of us. And the picks are flying in, so I may not even be able to keep up with the draft room. 45-second timer, guys. This is really, really flying by. Draft's going to be over with in a blink of an eye. Greg McCrae, player that I liked, passed him up in the queue as well. Looks like he went, or maybe he didn't. Yeah, he's gone. So there's a lot of players that I like. I haven't been able to keep up whether or not they're still available or not. So kind of racing up against the clock. I am 4 picks away, scrambling, looking for some players right now. And I'm going to try to go back to the running back position if I could see some of these. Okay, so found one. Let's go right down my list. And I'm on the clock just like that, guys. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and go with Xavier Valade, running back of Wyoming. I just feel that Wyoming offers a potential for a stud running back in college fantasy football. We've got the transfer from Louisville that went there. But I think Valade may have the claim to the way he finished up last year as being their top back headed into the 2019 season. And so with the potential, the ceiling that he has to offer at that #1 running back spot, I'll go ahead and take him and add him to my depth chart as well. So I'm going to see how many rounds this draft. Oh, wow. So this draft is 16 rounds. We're already in round 14. Malcolm Perry is off the board. Ian Book is still sitting there in the 14th round. My next pick will be round 15. And I have to tell you, I may as well throw out a few sleepers. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to get any because of if there's a draft requirement on here. But yeah, I still have Tristan Jackson in queue. I've still got Ian Book in queue. I still have DJ Matthews, wide receiver of Florida State, in queue. I still have Khalil Shakir, wide receiver of Boise State, who I do think is going to be a sleeper pick this year for college fantasy football. And I still have Trey Knox, the freshman receiver from Arkansas, who had an unbelievable spring. You've got Knox and you've got Burks coming in this summer. Those two guys are probably going to play. The only reason I'm going to go with Knox over Burks right now is because I already know what he did in the spring and he got rave reviews. But Burks is supposed to be just as good, maybe even better. But for the sake of argument, based on what I know already, I will likely jump on Trey Knox right here if the system allows me to take a wide receiver instead of a kicker or a defense special teams. If it allows me, if I have to take a kicker, defense special teams, I may wind up just timing out and it's going to end up being a default pick for me. So we'll see what happens here. So I am on the clock, and it allowed me to pick Trey Knox. So that's the pick that I did. It will allow me to skip over kicker and defense special teams. So I will be able to play out this draft according to my draft day philosophy that I like to use. If we were actually playing out this league, I would take this team right up until the season started and before I had to drop someone to pick up a defense or special teams. But I'm going to go into the second, after the draft is over, I'm going to stay on and I'm going to kind of explain some of my philosophy leading up to the season with drafts. Because, in my opinion, I've only got one more pick left, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on that right now. To have a college fantasy football draft with 130 that has 130 FBS teams as your player pool, To only have 12 teams in a league and only 16 roster spots is not enough. It's just, there are too many good players still left on the waiver wire, and full FBS leagues already have a rich waiver wire, even if you play with as many as 16 teams. So my suggestion is, and if you haven't bought the College Fantasy Football preseason, the College Fantasy Football Site 2019 preseason fantasy guide, we even offer suggestions of what your starting rosters should look like. If you want a great experience playing full FBS college fantasy football, remember guys, this isn't NFL. College fantasy football is not NFL. It's not the NFL experience. That's what draws us to it. It is way better than the NFL. We are not interested in guys that are going to run for 100 yards and a touchdown week in and week out. We want guys that are going to run for 250 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's what makes college fantasy football so interesting week in and week out. It's not restricting the roster. It's about how many points you can score every week. Let me go ahead and get this last pick in. For the sake of argument, I'll just go ahead and take, if Walter Fletcher was here for Ball State, I don't see him in there. So we're going to go ahead and just take, I'm going to pass on the quarterback. I'll pass on Ian Book. I won't get 3 quarterbacks. I'll tell you, Ian Book would probably be my quarterback, but for the sake of the mock draft, I'll go with Khalil Shakir, wide receiver, Boise State, who is one of my sleepers. I like taking sleepers in these type of drafts. I won't get graded well for the picks, but it's some of the players that I like to get out there. When I'm doing mock drafts and it's about giving the audience players, it's not about just going status quo. Ian Book, if I were playing the league out, would be the smart pick. But for me, I like the guy with high upside, guy that's going to create a little conversation, guy that's going to make questions come into the CFF site. And that's when I went ahead. That's why I went ahead and drafted Shakir for Boise State. So let me go ahead and tell everybody bye up in the chat room, and then I'll be with you guys and we'll close this live stream down for the night. So guys, we're in. The draft is over. We completed a 16-round mock draft in 50 minutes. Probably the fastest draft that I have ever done in a long time, at least. 12 teams, a lot of industry guys with college fantasy football, and it took us just 50 minutes to complete 16 rounds of the draft. I'll go over my team. But my name's Joe DeSalvo, the voice of the CFF site. If you're watching this on replay or if you're just tuning in now that the draft is complete, we're going to go ahead and post this up on the site. It won't be up till next week. I told John that I would hold off until he gets the article and content and results of this draft posted next week, which he said he'll have up. And then I'll go ahead and upload the video for everyone to watch. And I'm assuming we're going to get more people to watch this on replay than we have here live tonight. But a lot of the people that, everyone in this draft has a voice within the college fantasy football community. A lot of the guys are very active on Twitter. If you're not following them on Twitter, be sure to give them a follow on Twitter. Be sure to give John, Scott, Justin, I know they're hopping off the draft right now to go do a podcast that they produce every week. I think it's the on-campus podcast they produce every week over at Fantrax. And if you're not playing college fantasy football on Fantrax, you are doing college fantasy football wrong. They've got everything you need and more, whether you want to do Power 5, whether you want to do full FBS, whether you want to customize it to certain conferences, certain teams. Fantrax is your one-stop shop for college fantasy football, guys, and they don't pay me to say that, but I just believe that Fantrax is the best place for college fantasy football. So we just wrapped up a 16-round draft on there in about 50 minutes. And so I'm going to go through my rosters. If you followed along the draft, you know that the draft outpaced me. I've got all these pages I probably didn't need. I probably could have drafted off the top of my head. But I'm going to just go into some philosophies one more time and give you draft philosophy 101 coming from my head, what I like to do going into the draft, what I do during the draft, and then what we do after the draft leading up to the season. So that's what I'm going to do for you here tonight. So I said at the onset that I was targeting Rondale Moore. I actually thought that if I had a top anywhere past number 4, that I would target Rondale Moore. I'm one of those guys that in the past I targeted the Michael Crabtrees, the Justin Blackmons. I just feel that the stud wide receivers are so far and few between with college fantasy football, but that's who I like to target. So with that being said, Rondale Moore for me is at the top of the list. After Rondale Moore, I'd probably fall back into, getting to De'Aaron King, getting Jalen Hurts, and I have no problem taking, any of those guys at any point at the top of the draft, because this is college fantasy football, and here's my philosophy too. All things considered equal, if you don't see many differences between player A versus player B, go with the guy you like. This is college fantasy football. We have allegiances. We have loyalties to teams, to schools, to conferences. Take the guy that you would rather pull for on a Saturday afternoon than the guy that you would rather pull against because he's playing your favorite team or some of your favorite teams. And so that's my philosophy, but you can't miss. I mean, look, guys, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor. I mean, you can't really miss with those guys. I took Zach Moss at 4, right? I could have easily, why did I take Zach Moss I took Zach Moss at 9. I had Zach Moss at 4 in the rankings. I just think that Moss, with the amount of touches he's going to get at Utah, is a very solid first-round pick. And quite honestly, the first 3 picks of the draft were the only 3 picks I had time to really think about because the draft started flying. I'm trying to give commentary. I'm trying to check guys off my list. And so that's how things played out. But here's the thing. I said this as well earlier, and I'll say it again. Unless you get an elite defense, hold off on your defenses or kickers unless it's an absolute requirement by the roster recs set up by your commissioner to draft. Because if you don't get the Alabama, if you don't get the Clemson, if you don't get an elite defense, you're better off streaming the defenses, right? And here's why you do that. Because I would rather take position players with high ceilings and load them up in my bench slots, play this out throughout the summer, play it out throughout preseason camp, and let's see who's moving up on the depth chart, right? So you can take a chance on the Trey Knoxes of Arkansas, the Treylon Burks of Arkansas. You can take a chance on the Andrew Van Burens of Boise State if you're following the camps as we go, particularly if you draft early. And so as you lead up, as the season gets closer, you can then start dropping off some of the players that you took in the spots for the kickers and defense special teams to start filling out your roster and rounding out your roster. And here's another thing too, and I said this earlier as well. When you get to the middle of the draft, guys, start shooting high. Take the high ceiling guys. Middle of the draft on, you're going for high ceiling because you know what's going to happen? 3, 4, 5 weeks into the season, you're going to have these stud players hit the waiver wire. And who's expendable on your roster? It's going to be the average Joe Schmo that you drafted, right? So go for your high ceiling guys. If they don't work out, those are going to be the guys that you end up dropping for guys off of the waiver wire 4 to 5 weeks into the season anyway. So go big. Go for the elite players early. Go for some solid support guys up until around 5 or 6. And once when you get into round 7 or 8, shoot for the stars, guys. Shoot for the stars because chances are pretty good that if those guys don't work out, they're going to be the guys that drop off your roster as the season moves along. So that's sort of some of my philosophies. I see we have a few of you all, a few more of you all have hopped on since the show started. If you have any questions, get them in now. I'm going to only stay on for another few minutes. But this was the live stream of the 6th annual Summa Cum Laude College Fantasy Football Industry Mock Draft. And I said it before, I've said it a number of times. If you're not following a lot of the guys that were in here tonight, follow them on Twitter. Give them a follow. I'll shoot a shout out to a few guys specifically. John, one, for putting this on. John, Justin, and Scott do the podcast over at Fantrax. I've now said that a number of times. But give that a listen, guys. Everything that you do by following these guys, everything that you do by supporting the CFF site and becoming a member really just grows college fantasy football. And that's the purpose. That's what we do. And that's the reason for the college fantasy football site. It's you know, how many times guys come in and play college fantasy football, you try to recruit them for your league, and they're like, man, that sounds really fun. And every other guy that you get in the league halfway through the season says, you know what? I just couldn't keep up with my team. It's too much. That's what we're here for, guys. That's what the CFF site's here for. That's what the guys that were in this draft, follow them on Twitter. And then I'm going to give a shout out to my college fantasy football brother, Mike Bainbridge, as well. If you're not supporting him on Patreon, you really need to do so, guys. There cannot be enough voices in college fantasy football right now. We need as many as we possibly can. We like to think that the college fantasy football site is the flag bearer for college fantasy football. But guys, there are so many guys out there talking about it. You need to follow around. The bigger we can build this umbrella, the bigger we can build this building, the bigger we make college fantasy football. And that's been our mantra over the years. We've now been around for 8 years. We're into our 8th season with the college fantasy football site, and we're just doing a little bit more each and every year, and that's because of you guys. So first of all, we'd like to thank everybody for their support. We're going to go ahead and get ready and sign off unless I have any questions coming in. It seems pretty quiet here. I've got a number of you all watching the live stream, but for everyone watching it on replay, thank you. I know it's been pretty extensive. I know it's been pretty long, but thanks for everyone hanging in there, and thanks for everyone for supporting the CFF site in 2019. We'll be doing more live streams and videos leading up to the season. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.